watch her on the NFL Network all the time. She is my personal favorite, the only one to pick the Detroit Lions. It's Cynthia Freeland, NFL Network analytics expert, show host, the works, and she's from Okemos, Michigan. Welcome to the show, Cynthia.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. I have all my Lions gear on. I don't know, the remix didn't work, so.
That's okay. It happens. You're not the first one to not get through, Cynthia. I appreciate it. I know you're rooting for the Lions. You were the only one to pick them on the whole NFL Network. Basically, all the networks picked the Rams. This time, what kind of game are we going to expect against this Buccaneers team?
Well, I think the key, again, will come down to Jared Goff keeping himself out of harm's way, staying clean. We know the Bucs like to blitz. They blitzed at the third highest rate in the regular season. So I would imagine you're going to have to see what happens again. But he was 21 for 21 last week when he wasn't under pressure. So pretty good stuff.
Cynthia Freeland from NFL Network joins us. Okemos, Michigan. That's a little close to Michigan State, man. Were you always good? Were you behind enemy lines being that close to Michigan State?
Well, I actually was trying to find. I had, a Braylon Edwards jersey from a while back. I couldn't find it. I did, yes, absolutely. And I didn't go to either one. So my Big Ten school that I paid for is Northwestern. So,
hey, well, I love
that
Northwestern.
was my grad.
A lot of love there.
Perfect.
So much is made about Baker Mayfield and this offense, as it should be. I mean, you see what he did to the Philadelphia Eagles, and along the way, that offensive wide receiver corps has found their balance. But I want to talk about the defense, man. We just had TJ Reeves, sideline reporter from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, on, and he's talking about Kalijah Kancey, and he's talking about Antoine Winfield. Talk about what that defense can spell problems for this Detroit Lions offense.
Sure. So, I mean, Kalijah Kancey was kind of came out of nowhere. Same with Yaya Diaby. And not really came out of nowhere, but, as rookies, you're not really sure what to expect. We know Todd Bowles does not like to allow opposing offenses to run the football. So that's going to be something that's going to be interesting against this front that has played really well and allowed the run game to really get play action going, keep Jared Goff out of trouble. So that's one area where we're going to have to watch out. And then the second situation is going to be just stay away from Antoine Winfield Jr. Sure, he was snubbed for the Pro Bowl, but he's not snubbed for the All-Pro team, which, probably is a bigger honor, in my opinion. So, that's going to – but other than that, there are some other places where they can get got. And you saw it last week. Devontae Smith had some nice catches, some areas, and we know that Jared Goff can throw the in-breaker. You know that.
Yeah, Cynthia, Matt Broder here. Thanks so much for joining us. I had a question in your most recent article on NFL.com. You opened it. It was really great. You talked about your love for the Lions and then analytics being almost an augmented element to the personal, the emotional side of a sport, of football in this case. Can you talk a little bit about that? With this game being so unique between the Bucs and the Lions, can you talk about that, how that factors into your analytics?
Totally. So when you have 11 people on each side doing 22 different things at any one moment, it's very hard to kind of use analytics in the same way, say, baseball or even basketball has popularized it, right? Moneyball, we saw that, all the stuff. But the interesting part about analytics for football, and every team has an analytics department, whether or not they're called that, sometimes it's hidden in quality control, just have different titles. The whole point is to create the optimal set of circumstances for a player to best achieve their best self, meaning, let's leverage the speed and explosive nature of Jahmyr Gibbs, but it was smart to roll him out kind of not necessarily from day one, but as the season progressed. Things like that, making decisions. It's just the same as when you have any business, you want to make the best decisions possible. It doesn't always mean that the outcome is optimal, but you have to know if you're making the higher or lower probability situation so that you can look at what you've done, your body of work, and say, this is where we can improve. This is how we've used our assets the right way. This is how our best serving our players and our fans and to get a win, right? Because we all want the same end goal, which is to win the football game. But you have to take it from, okay, how do you get to point differential being in your favor, first downs, touchdowns, or stopping them on defense, for example? And how do you best support that? Maybe it's pressure for some teams. If they have better secondary, then perhaps it's through different types of coverages. So it's really trying to find ways to optimize for your strengths and minimize your weaknesses.
Cynthia Freeland joins us, NFL Network, Okemos, a native Lions fan.
There you go.
She's got it all. She's going to be here, by the way, this weekend. She's going to be at Ford Field Saturday at noon. You're going to watch her on NFL Network. And then She'll be across the street on Sunday, guys. You know it. It's the Elwood Bar. Sunday at 11 a.m., NFL game day. Her and Colleen Wolfe in the morning. And she's an Okemos girl. So that's going to be exciting for you, Cynthia, coming back home. They finally let you out of the studio.
So I'm an indoor cat. Me and Jared Goff, we prefer the indoors. But they let me out. They let me out on the road, and it's funny because Colleen Wolfe actually happens to be one of my real life best friends too.
Awesome.
So it's very cool to be able to experience this with her. I mean, she's an Eagles fan, so whatever, we can forgive her for that.
Yeah.
We can forgive her for that, but it'll be good. And a lot of my Okemos friends are gonna come down and go to the bar and bring their kids and their grandparents, and it's just so special to share stories about where you were the last time the Lions won. And I mean, I don't even really remember it. I was a little young, and I keep checking my app, and I remind people like, hey, we didn't even have an app the last time the Lions won a home playoff game. There was no iPhone, no smartphones,
Nothing.
like barely anyone had the internet. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, just to prove you're a Detroit
Absolutely.
girl, tell everybody the name of your dog.
Gordy.
Gordy.
As in Gordon Howe, of
That's
course.
it. That's it. Hey,
And
when
he's
you-
like the cutest husky. He's a rescue,
love
and he's
it.
just the best. He doesn't fight. He doesn't do the Gordie Howe hat trick because he's not a fighter. He's a lover.
There you go.
Hey, wait
But-
till you see the Gordie Howe Bridge when you get here. It's almost completed. The bridge from Detroit to Canada. It's the second bridge that they're building. It's going to be open hopefully next year at some point. But it's the Gordie Howe International Bridge. Make sure your driver takes you past there so you could take a look at it,
sure.
see the scenes.
Definitely got to see that. Hey,
Absolutely.
Cynthia, from a national point of view, you talk about the Detroit Lions over the last 3 years and kind of the road it took to get here. It was 3-13 in 1 year, then it was 8-2 in the last 10 games last year, and now here winning the division. Just talk about what it's been like to watch the Lions from afar. Dan Campbell as a coach and this players kind of get to this moment.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I wasn't sure what to expect from Dan Campbell because, obviously we know he has a lot of heart, but, to really get everyone to buy in is very, very hard. You know that, being a player, it's difficult. 3-13 seasons do not make for happy players. It just doesn't. So it really speaks to how much he was able to impart his wisdom, his personality, his authenticity on the team that it's gotten to here. And obviously being in lockstep with his GM. I mean, for goodness sake, you have to bring in the right set of people. This is a team that, the draft was really interesting. Being able to get Brian Branch in the second round was extremely lucky, especially because last year was not the biggest deal. And not even, that was not even known as, a draft where people were like, hey, it's so deep. So to get that kind of production from the second-round pick is really incredible. And that's not even talking about the first-round guys, right?
know.
These are historic numbers from your tight end, and really great numbers in production from your rookie running back. So these are things that are special. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, that guy's a huge deal too. I mean, you forget that, people, there's those Elite 11, which is this quarterback thing. I know you guys all know it, but maybe the listeners don't, right? Where it's quarterbacks, they go participate around the country and Nike sponsors it. I remember talking to some Elite 11 coaches, and they were like, who's going to be great? Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Wow.
And I'm like, really? This is and they were right. They were completely right. So being able to get these people to work in a way that supports what the mission is and kind of make up for some of the deficiencies, because we know there's areas of the defense that could be a little bit patched up. But, I mean, C.J. Gardner-Johnson is a massive help. That's a big deal. And being without him was difficult.
Hey, what's your take on you're the analytics guru. What's your take on how Dan Campbell runs this team, going on fourth down all the time? And, of course, go back to the Dallas game and all the extra point tries. I want to hear your opinion on that, Cynthia.
Well, the first thing about the fourth downs, so there's two really important parts about this is people always say, on the broadcast now, you hear people say, the analytics say to go for it. And that is kind of my personal pet peeve because that's an average of what's happened in the past. It doesn't take into account what your team is, the type of defense you're facing, or the situation of that only the coach could know is hey, my right guard's been banged up 80 times by Aaron Donald. We can't do this, right? These are the types of things where you have to have the touch in the field. This is where it becomes art in addition to science. So sometimes it drives me nuts in the broadcast when people say that. But the truth is if you have the right sets of fourth down, you practice them more often, and your team understands what the assignment is, you give yourself a better chance of making it happen when you do go for it. So I like that that's the identity of the team and that's the identity of the coach, and it's been clearly communicated. So that's where and obviously the strength of this, to me, I spent my master's thesis studying offensive linemen, which is really nerdy, but ultimately that's one of the massive strengths of this team is how the offensive line works and really keeps everything in check for a lot longer than many other teams. I mean, I'm sure, Braylon, you could talk about how having a good O-line is better than not having one, right? So, but at the end of the day, that's great. And then the Dallas game, I loved the game plan. I thought it was really sound, and if you ask me, they won that game. I understand that the record book says something different, but that was a massive win in terms of Dan Quinn is not an easy defensive mind to figure out, even if last week looked a little weird from the Packers standpoint. That was the first time in any game this season that they didn't have multiple pressures from the same defensive player. They only had 4 total pressures that entire game. So against the Lions, you were getting Dan Quinn best. You weren't getting Dan Quinn's confusion.
Yeah, 100% I agree. It's like blackjack. There's what the book tells me to do, and there's what my chips also will allow me to do, math.
Cynthia, I want to ask you, if you had to pick a game here, who's the tougher team to face? Was it the Rams, or is it this Buccaneers team for the Lions?
I think the Rams, because of the fact that they kind of had some similar structures, meaning, Puka Nacua sort of came out of nowhere. Those deep crossers that he was able to complete, I mean, you even saw it at Ford Field, right? Like he was a special kind of runner, and they had something going on with Kyron Williams too that was great. So, and look, Aaron Donald and Jared Goff, yet they know each other. And I love the narrative about like Matthew Stafford and Jared. They don't really know each other, but I know Jared Goff knows Sean McVay. So sure, there were a lot of narratives there, but I do think that team, they had some interesting kind of at the end of the season, they started to put the things together correctly. So they're kind of on this upward trajectory. Sure, the Bucs have overachieved given what we thought ahead of the season, but they still have some areas where it's not to say that I think that they're, not a very good team, because they are, but their run game for the second straight season has been the least productive in the National Football League. Now, Dave Canales has figured something out, throwing short passes to running backs. Sure, that matters. However, the actual run game is really, really indicative of who wins football games, and they don't necessarily have that as a consistent thing that they can rely on.
Hey, Cynthia, last one. I just wanted to ask about the coaches. Bill Belichick is about to become the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. I'm in shock over this. The Dallas Cowboys are keeping Mike McCarthy. There's about 9 other jobs available. What is the most intriguing thing to you?
I want everyone to keep their grubby paws off of Ben Johnson.
Yes.
But that's what the most no. But ultimately, I think there's a few things that are going to happen here. Let's fast forward, and let's say whenever the season's over for the Texans, I'm curious how both Bobby Slowick and actually, it kind of sounds strange, but Gerard Johnson is a name to keep an eye on too. He's the quarterback coach down there for the Texans. They all have that, like, I'm curious to see this year between the Shanahan trees and like the Norv Turner trees, right? Like that's going to be interesting for me because Mike McDonald, where he ends up, the Baltimore, obviously Michigan people know Mike McDonald as former defensive coordinator. So where he ends up is going to be fascinating as well because there's so many people. We've emphasized offense so much. I actually think there's going to be an advantage for teams to figure out their defense correctly as well this next offseason because I don't know if I wouldn't call Bill, obviously he's a defensive-minded head coach, but he's more of like, you're going to get the best of both sides there, so take him out. But a lot of these other names being floated tend to be offensive guys, and I'm curious to see how that all works.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Cynthia Freeland, NFL Network Analytics, and she's on all the shows. She's a must-watch, especially during the fantasy football year. And she's a Michigan girl, and she's a Lions fan, and her dog is named Gordy. And she's going to be at Ford Field Saturday, 12 noon, and live from the Elwood right across. You know where it is, guys.
Check her out,
the Elwood Bar right across on Sunday at 11 a.m. Colleen Wolf and her for NFL Game Day mornings. We appreciate your time, Cynthia. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Let's go, Lions. Come on, one more. Let's go.
We'll talk to you again after the Lions win and win the NFC Championship.
You got it.
Yes.
All right, kiddo.
We will.
You heard her. She said, okay.
She did because she agreed. She knows what time it is. Cynthia Freeland, we appreciate you and NFL Network.
She's brilliant, by the way.
She is. She knows her stuff. We could have talked to her for a lot longer.
Yep.